I would say a lot of people identified relatively early where Dave Rubin's partisan bias lay. Whereas the way that you spoke about him, and maybe the way to do it is, if you don't mind, I have a clip from a conversation you had a couple of years ago with Aina, a persistent critic of yours,
Right.
who also is not super fond of us.
She went a little crazy in my view, but yeah.
Well, there's a conversation you had about Gad Saad and Dave Rubin. And I just want to play this little clip of it. And then I'll tell you what I hear from it. And you can tell me why I'm reading this wrong, if that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to do this, but the reason why this might be a waste of time is this is now a few years old. And I'm sure what you're going to play there is born of the fact that in the case of Dave in particular, I'm being asked to talk about a friend in public. I've been reluctant to do that in many cases. And it's like, I have social relationships with many of these people, or I had social relationships with many of these people.
I entirely grant that, Sam, but I think it will help the player. And it's not intended as a gotcha.
Okay, go for it.
I just want to use it to illustrate a point. Okay. And then I'll allow you to respond.
Okay.
Now that's a different problem from Gad and Rubin. Rubin, who I think is unfortunately an opportunist. I don't know if he believes that these are his friends now, the alt-right, or if he's just playing to an audience that happens to be supporting him and paying him pretty well, you know?
Yeah, no, I don't think, again, I think Dave...
And I don't want you to answer that either, because, I mean, you can if you want. I don't want you to feel like you have to answer for them, because you're not responsible for them at all.
Well, no, but it just, insofar as I think you have the wrong idea about them, I think it's useful to say so, because, Dave seems to me to be an extremely ethical person who would check all the right boxes in terms of, gay rights and women's rights. And I mean,
I think you're so wrong about that.
Okay. But I mean, so then that's something that I think you're wrong about. And I wouldn't know how to resolve that apart from, getting him on your podcast or you on his and
but why do you think I'm wrong when I've shown you like a list of the people that refusing to call out?
Well, I just think it's what you're reading into the refusal to call them out. I mean, so there's what could be functioning there is he has a very journalistic agenda or a much more journalistic agenda than I do.
And I feel that Gad and Rubin have gone too far to the other side.
Right. Well, it could be in terms of their public work that may be the case. And again, I'm speaking somewhat from ignorance because I haven't seen even anything close to the majority of their interviews. But I see nothing. I know nothing. In terms of my interactions with them privately, that's not going on at all. So that's at least and again, I mean, these are not people who I've spent a tremendous amount of time with. I see nothing. I know nothing. But I've it's just insofar as you can get the measure of another person's mind by having dinner with them, it's that's certainly my view of them. Okay, I'm not sure what my view was there. We left the predicate out somehow, but I'm not sure what I was claiming about them. I guess I was claiming that they're more liberal than she was alleging or something.
She was making the point that they have a clear partisan skew and that they are platforming a bunch of right-wing people without giving pushback. And you were essentially arguing that, well, they're just having discussions and that from your experience with Dave, that he is a very principled journalistic person. Now, I get entirely the issue about interpersonal connections, but two things here. One is your interpersonal connections tend to be directed around a certain group of people. So I don't think you can categorize that off that like an unwillingness to criticize directly a certain type of people is a tribal bias. And then the second part of that is that you, in this period before, essentially you're arguing that Gad Saad and Dave Rubin are not partisans. I think now, clearly from your interactions, you would agree that they are. And similarly, people have been alleging for a number of years that people like the Weinsteins have a tendency towards conspiracism and sympathy for various right-leaning people. And I would put Douglas Murray in the same category. And it's essentially that your charity there was extended towards a certain group of people. And like now, I think when you handed in your card and stuff, you're admitting that now you see their bias, but other people recognize their bias before. So it isn't always the case that the people alleging that there is a skew or a bias are just like social justice run amok, misidentifying things. They identified something you didn't see, and you didn't see it because of your sympathy and interpersonal relationships, which is a tribal bias.
Well, no, I don't agree with the diagnosis. As I said in that clip, I was not in the habit of watching or listening to much of what Dave and Gad were putting out.
I see nothing. I know nothing.
Right. So I was claiming ignorance even while I was saying the few times I had dinner with those guys, I didn't detect any right-wing allegiance. That was basically the extent of what I said there. Now, things have changed in the intervening years. I don't know if you notice what Gad says about me on social media, but the guy is working very hard to make a permanent enemy of me, right? He's just attacking me by name as a utter hypocrite and sellout, and I don't recall the specific allegations, but he thinks my reaction to Trump has destroyed my mind and made me a totally dishonest person. So that's what he thinks of me. So if we're in the same tribe, how durable was that tribalism if the guy hates me and he's expressed it ad nauseum?
Yeah, but that in itself has been an interesting episode. I mean, you mentioned before.
And Dave, just to close the loop on this is one episode of Dave's podcast I did see recently. He had Gad on and Michael Shermer and Peter Boghossian, two other men who I think you would put squarely in my tribe. And they didn't attack me by name, but it was clear they were, I mean, I don't think Peter and Michael knew what was being talked about there or what was on the agenda, but Gad and Dave clearly referenced me without naming me. And they just shat all over me in that episode.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I saw that episode too, Sam. Look, just a quick comment, which I don't think you disagree with, which is that like you and actually many people on the moderate